Welcome to Interesting Game, Magnus Carlsen versus Saleh Salem.
Where we have another exciting matchup between the greatest chess player of all time, Magnus Carlsen, going up against Grandmaster from the United Arab Emirates. It's Saleh Salem, and they are playing a Sicilian defense. But Magnus, he's chosen to play this with a bit of an Italian flair. He's moved his bishop out to c4, knight out to f3, and now he's played this a4 move. And the position very much resembles the Joko piano opening, or as some chess streamer would call it, the Gucci piano. And now Magnus, he's playing this in very Italian style. He brings his rook out to e1, supporting the e4 pawn. And I assume that his knight on b1 is going to make the classic trip d2 to f1, maybe to g3. And the difference between this and the Italian opening is that, well, Salem, he has this pawn on c5. And after a 30-second think, now he plays e5. And so we are really in e4, e5 territory. He's clamping down on the d4 square, stopping Magnus from playing this d4 break. But this has largely weakened the d5 pawn because unlike in the Italian opening, Salem, he's played the move pawn to c5. And so now Magnus's whole game plan is going to be around this d5 square. I can imagine maybe his dark squared bishop is going to go out to g5 at some point, which would attack the knight on f6, one important piece that's controlling the d5 square. And now this knight, which has gone to f1, typically goes to g3 to support the e4 pawn. But I think Magnus, instead, he's going to reroute to e3. And he's going to play knight to d5. Salem, he plays h6 very quickly, stopping the dark squared bishop from going to g5. Excellent positional understanding from the players so far, recognizing which pieces are going to be important over the fight for this d5 square. And now Magnus, he brings his knight closer into the center of the board, knight to e3. He is still eyeing d5. And he is also stopping the light squared bishop from going out to g4. So for Salem, it's unclear what he might do. He might expand on the queen side. Yeah, b5 is a very typical move. But Magnus, he is now in control of the open a file. And Salem, it might take him some time to regain control of this open a file. And in the meantime, Magnus, he still has a lot of ideas, like trying to plant a piece on d5, or even going for our old friend, this d4 break, opening up the position at the right time, could yield great results. Magnus starts by hopping his knight into d5. If Salem were to capture this knight, Magnus would quickly recapture with his bishop. It's very important in chess that when you have weak squares, you want pieces on those squares, controlling a lot of space in the enemy territory instead of a pawn, which could act as a weakness in the future. Salem, he brings his rook to the e file. Magnus is not interested in taking this dark squared bishop. Black's dark squared bishop is currently hemmed in by his own pawns. Most of the pawns are on dark squares, and this dark squared bishop is also not contributing to the fight over d5. Magnus, he routes his knight to d2. He's gonna bring it to f1, and then e3, and then to d5. The fight is all over this weakness on d5. Now, Salem, he might bring out his bishop to e6. That's a very natural move. And if Magnus rushes to recapture that bishop, maybe Salem will take with his f-pawn. And there, white will no longer be able to abuse the fact that the d5 square is weak. But if the f-pawn does move to e6, then maybe the light squares around the king suddenly become weak. And so if Magnus captures on e6, maybe it would be a better option to capture with the queen or the rook, but Magnus, he starts by sliding his rook up to a6, attacking the knight, which is loose. And while Salem thinks about how to defend his knight, I just want to remind you that if you're enjoying the content so far and you want more educational and entertaining commentary, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. That would help out the algorithm a lot. Thank you. In the meantime, Salem, he's chosen to bring his other rook over to c6, defending the knight this way. And at some point, I think he would be very happy if he could play rook to a8, which would evict the rook out of his home on the a file. And he's saying rent is late. What are you gonna do? Unfortunately for Magnus, I think the only real option is to take the rook on a8, trade off the rooks, and now have black control the open a file. But for the moment, there's nothing really on the a file for Salem to take advantage of. Magnus, he quickly plays bishop to d5, pinning the knight to the rook on a8. Salem takes the bishop on d5, and now Magnus, look at this monstrous knight jumping into the middle of the board, attacking the queen. Now Magnus brings his queen to b3, attacking the weak b5 pawn. And it kind of starts to feel like Magnus is squeezing the position, because Black's dark squared bishop on f8, it's protecting the king very nicely. But besides that, it's not doing much. And White has this really strong knight on d5, controlling a lot of squares in the enemy camp, and Magnus, sensing the moment to go into an endgame, he brings his king to f1, and now the king is most likely going to go to e2. But first, Magnus, he brings his bishop to e3. He's trying to make way for his rook to go to b1, where it can protect the b2 pawn. And I think maybe his plan will be to bring his king from e2 to d2 to c2, free up his rook, and then he will move his rook over to the king side, where he might generate some play over there. Now for the moment, the position seems pretty calm. It seems about equal. But both players, Salem, he's down to 50 seconds on the clock. Magnus has a 30-second time advantage. And still, Salem, he's burning precious time here, thinking of maybe an active plan for black. And it's really not clear what exactly black should do in order to defend the position. Salem, he tries to force things. He plays pawn to c4. But Magnus doesn't have to take this pawn. If Magnus were to take this pawn, that c4 pawn would be a bit of a thorn in black's side, tying down the b2 and c3 pawns. But Magnus, I think he can just calmly bring his king to e2. Although there is some danger there. King to e2, maybe black can start pushing the b5 pawn and take advantage of the fact that the rook and the king are both on the second rank, and there could be a potential pin. After spending some time, Magnus, he brings his king to e2, and maybe this king is still again going to go to d2 and c2. But I think also white can just go after this b5 pawn. Knight to c7 is an excellent way to go after this b5 pawn. And what will Salem do there? Knight to c7. Maybe Salem will now try to start the complications. b4. And then maybe c3. Let's see. He does play b4. If Magnus takes his pawn now, and Magnus, he raises his eyebrows. Did Salem manage to trick Magnus here with some powerful pawn play? And c3 very quickly. Salem not even thinking. How will Magnus manage the complications of the pin along the second rank? And he just calmly plays king to d1. Cool as a cucumber, letting black take the pawn on b2. But he knows that after some recaptures on b2, his king is in time to go to c2. And I think this is how it's going to play out. Rook takes b2, rook takes b2, pawn takes b2. And the king will just go to c2 and manage to recapture this b2 pawn. And now, because white just has this outside passer on the queen side, things are looking quite hopeless for Salem. And I think with 10 seconds on the clock, it's going to be very difficult to defend this pass pawn position, especially with this dark squared bishop on f8, which is just out of the game.
Magnus Carlsen resigned this position. Thanks for watching this video.